Some names and details in this story have been changed for anonymity and confidentiality. Not all photographs are from the actual scene.
Around 30:20 in the afternoon on June 18, 2017, a surveillance camera near the western trail of Yellowstone National Park captured footage of an 11-year-old boy named Ethan Cole and his caregiver Margaret Lewis, 46 years old, walking away from the crowded area and heading into a narrow path that almost no one noticed. Both appeared normal, with no signs of panic, and neither of them knew that it would be the last time they would be seen in daylight. Just a few minutes later, they vanished completely, without a trace, without any cries for help, as if they had been swallowed up by the wilderness itself. Large-scale search efforts were launched that same night, but found no signs that they were still alive, nor any evidence of an accident or animal attack. The disappearance quickly became a chilling mystery where every hypothesis was raised, but none provided a convincing answer. 2 years passed, and memories of them gradually faded from the media, but they never disappeared from the obsession of those who continued to search for the truth. Then one day, deep in an area almost no one ever set foot in, a strange structure was discovered, one that did not belong to nature and was not recorded on any map. What lay beneath it was not just a hiding place, but a sign of something built with deliberate purpose, enough to make the first people who saw it fall silent. Before going deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. On June 12, 2016, the sky over Yellowstone National Park was clear blue, with thin wisps of steam rising from the hot springs amid the familiar peaceful scenery of peak tourist season. Crowds poured onto the trails and famous viewpoints, creating a steady, crowded but orderly flow of movement, with no signs that anything unusual was about to happen. The Cole family was present in the park during a summer vacation that had been planned in advance, with a clear itinerary, specific stops identified, and the entire journey taking place in safe, heavily visited areas. Ethan Cole, 11 years old, always stayed with Margaret Doyle, 62 years old, the caregiver the family trusted to directly supervise him, ensuring the boy followed the schedule and did not separate from the group throughout the trip. In the many days prior, all activities proceeded normally, with no signs of risk or internal conflict. On the afternoon of the incident, after completing a main viewpoint, Ethan and Margaret left the crowded, concentrated area to walk a short distance nearby, heading toward a side trail off the main route, a choice not uncommon for visitors wanting to avoid the crowds and find a quieter space. Weather conditions were stable, visibility was good, and no danger warnings had been issued by park management. Their last appearance was recorded by a surveillance camera near the trail entrance, where both moved at a normal pace with no signs of coercion or stress. A witness passing through the area also confirmed seeing them enter the less traveled section, but noted no unusual behavior. After that point, all traces of Ethan and Margaret vanished completely. There were no cries for help, no signs of struggle, and no personal items left behind in the nearby area. The expected time for them to return passed without them appearing. So family members began searching the immediate area themselves, walking along connecting trails and checking possible stopping points, but found no signs that they had returned or continued in any identifiable direction. Calls to Margaret's phone went unanswered, as the device had either lost signal or stopped working in the area, causing all communication attempts to fail. The fact that Ethan was not carrying his own communication device made the situation even more serious. As time continued to pass without any new information, the family began to realize this was no longer a normal delay in the itinerary, especially since the area where they disappeared was not a dangerous or hard-to-reach location. Recognizing the unusual situation, the family quickly contacted park authorities to report the incident and then officially notified the police that Ethan Cole and Margaret Doyle were missing. Immediately after receiving the missing persons report from the Cole family at Yellowstone National Park, park rangers and rescue teams activated emergency search procedures on the same day, focusing all resources on the last area where Ethan Cole and Margaret Doyle had been seen. The initial search perimeter was established based on the direction of movement recorded by the surveillance camera, then quickly expanded alongside trails and adjacent terrain areas accessible within a short time frame. Search teams were divided into small groups to sweep specific areas, combining foot patrols with aerial observation to ensure no possible location containing traces was overlooked. Tracking dogs were deployed to follow scents from the starting point, while professional rescue teams carried positioning and communication equipment that operated continuously for many hours. At the same time, drones were used to scan complex terrain areas, including dense forest sections, rocky crevices, and positions difficult for ground teams to check immediately. During the sweep, some personal items were found scattered at various points, including small objects that Margaret had been confirmed to be carrying earlier. But their locations did not match normal movement behavior, were not along a continuous route, and did not form a logical trail sequence. These items appeared separately, spaced at irregular intervals, raising suspicion that they had not been dropped accidentally during travel. When expanding the search around the area, authorities found no continuous footprints leading away from the last known point. Instead, the trail was interrupted at a specific spot with no clear direction of continuation. This prevented search teams from determining the victim's next direction of movement, forcing them to conduct searches in expanding circles rather than following a specific path. Throughout the process, environmental and wildlife experts were also mobilized to assess the possibility of natural accidents or animal attacks, but found no signs consistent with those scenarios. There was no blood, no drag marks, and no evidence of predatory animal presence in the area. The terrain at the last recorded point also lacked dangerous features such as cliffs, deep holes, or strong currents that could cause sudden accidents. In the following days, the search area continued to expand to more distant locations, including areas off the main trails and rarely visited spots, under the assumption that the victims might have traveled farther than expected or become disoriented. However, despite maintaining a high-intensity search, no additional new evidence was found. Drones continued wide-area scans. Tracking dogs repeatedly returned to the starting point but could not follow scents beyond the initial area, and rescue teams rotated shifts continuously to ensure the search was not interrupted. After many days of continuous searching without obtaining any signs of survival or new leads, authorities at Yellowstone National Park were forced to decide to end the active search phase, shifting to a monitoring and data review status. This decision was made after the highest probability areas had been swept multiple times using both manual and assisted methods, with no basis left to maintain the initial search scale. The case file was then transferred to a criminal investigation direction. Assuming the disappearance of Ethan Cole and Margaret Doyle might involve human factors rather than natural accidents or ordinary getting lost, investigators began re-examining all evidence collected during the search phase, including the locations of personal items, camera data, witness statements, and information related to people present in the area at the time. However, despite the systematic analysis, no specific suspects were identified, and there was no direct evidence of abduction or deliberate attack. No suspicious vehicles were clearly recorded, no witnesses provided information about a coercive situation, and no physical signs at the scene indicated clear third-party intervention. The gaps in the data limited the investigation, especially since the incident area was vast, with multiple access points and not comprehensively monitored. The Cole family, unwilling to accept the case becoming stalled, proactively contacted the media to keep public attention alive, providing information about Ethan and Margaret, and urging anyone with leads to contact authorities. In the early stage, the case received significant attention, appearing on local news and some national media outlets, creating certain pressure on investigators. However, as time passed without new developments, attention gradually decreased, reports became fewer, and the case was gradually replaced by other events in the news cycle. The family continued efforts to maintain the case's visibility through their own channels, but effectiveness became increasingly limited without new information to sustain public interest. Within the investigating agencies, the case file remained open but was no longer prioritized as in the initial phase due to the lack of data to develop specific investigative directions. 2 years after the disappearance of Ethan Cole and Margaret Doyle at Yellowstone National Park had stalled and been placed on the list of unsolved cases. A chance discovery completely changed the perspective on the incident. In late autumn, an independent hiker not affiliated with Park Services, while moving off popular trails, discovered a structure deep in a rarely accessed area, far from main viewpoints, and not marked on any tourist guide maps. From the outside, the structure resembled an old wooden cabin, with a weathered surface, a roof covered in dry leaves and branches, giving the impression of a long-abandoned structure. There were no clear signs of current habitation such as smoke, lights, or frequent paths, and the surrounding area had no direct trail leading to it, making it almost completely isolated from visitor activity. However, upon closer approach, the person noticed some details inconsistent with the abandoned appearance it presented. Some floorboards showed fresher signs than the rest of the structure, screws that were not uniformly rusted, and some joints between materials indicated recent intervention. These details were not easily noticeable from a distance, but became clear upon close inspection, raising suspicion that the structure was not entirely forgotten, as its exterior suggested. The discoverer then notified park rangers, and an inspection team was sent to evaluate the scene. During the initial check, rangers swept the entire cabin, finding no signs of current occupancy on the above-ground level, but continued to note structural anomalies. One floor area had a different solidity compared to the rest. Upon closer examination, it appeared designed to open or conceal a space below. After dismantling part of the floor, authorities discovered a carefully concealed entrance leading down to an underground space beneath the cabin. This entrance was not easily noticeable without direct inspection, designed to blend with the surrounding structure, and featured a sealing mechanism from above that limited external detection. Upon accessing the underground space, rangers realized this was not a natural cavity or existing cave, but a deliberately constructed system with reinforced surfaces, clear edges, and calculated spatial arrangement. The materials used were simple but solidly installed, forming a sealed space completely isolated from the outside environment. No natural light entered, and the entire below-ground area was covered with layers of material to limit sound and light from escaping. Although no victims were found during the initial inspection, the signs inside indicated the space had been used for a significant period. There were traces of habitation, accumulation of biological elements, and environmental changes inside inconsistent with an empty structure. These features led authorities to conclude that this was not merely an illegal construction, but could be directly related to organized confinement. This discovery was immediately reported to higher investigative units, and the case file was reopened with an entirely new approach. Rather than an unexplained disappearance, the scene evidence began to suggest the possibility that Ethan Cole and Margaret Doyle had been removed from the public area and held in a pre-prepared space with the purpose of concealment and total control. This marked a major turning point in the nature of the case. From a disappearance with no clear cause to suspicion of a deliberately built confinement system that had existed for a long time without detection. The structure discovered under the cabin did not exist as a single space, but was organized into a tightly linked multi-layered system, with each layer serving a distinct function to support the goal of concealment and absolute control. The entire system was divided into three main levels: the outer camouflage layer, the intermediate protective layer, and the deep underground holding core, forming an interconnected sequence that made access, detection, and escape nearly impossible without precise knowledge of the structure. The outer camouflage layer was designed as an old-looking wooden cabin that blended completely with the surrounding natural environment, creating no distinguishable differences from other possibly abandoned structures scattered across the vast area of Yellowstone National Park. The wood colors were uneven. The surface showed natural weathering, and the roof was fully covered with dry leaves and branches, creating a camouflage layer that made the structure almost disappear when viewed from a distance or from above. No clear path led to the cabin. The surrounding area had no signs of frequent movement, no household trash or evidence of human activity, all reinforcing the image of a forgotten structure. Beneath that camouflage was the intermediate protective layer, serving as a deliberate physical barrier designed to prevent any random access. The system entrance was not in an easily noticeable position, but integrated into the cabin floor, where the planks were fitted so precisely that they created no clear difference in sound or vibration when stepped on. Part of the floor could be opened, but only by applying force to the pre-designed mechanism, while from below there was no way to access or operate it to open and exit. The sealing mechanism operated on a one-way principle, allowing controllers from above to lock the entire system tightly, eliminating any possibility of escape from inside. Joints between materials were treated to create no gaps, no light leakage, no unusual airflow, and no sound unless operated with exact knowledge. Hiding the entrance this way meant that even if someone entered the cabin, the chance of detecting the system below remained extremely low. The holding core lay deep underground, completely separated from the outside environment both spatially and in living conditions. Built as a sealed space with surfaces reinforced solidly, using simple but effective materials. Thick wooden planks, metal bars, and basic soundproofing layers were used to form a structural block with no obvious weak points, minimizing the transmission of sound and vibration to the outside. This space had no windows, no natural light sources, with all light and air completely dependent on control from above. The size of the holding core was calculated to restrict movement, not allowing those inside to stand straight or change posture comfortably for long periods, thereby gradually reducing physical strength and resistance ability. No items inside could be used as escape tools. All surfaces were smooth or hard, with no grips or gaps to exploit. Joints between materials were tightly reinforced, showing no signs of temporary assembly, indicating the structure was built for long-term use rather than short-term purpose. Materials were chosen not for aesthetics but entirely for durability, load-bearing capacity, and availability, allowing construction to proceed step by step without complex specialized equipment, while still achieving high effectiveness in creating a hard-to-penetrate sealed space. The location of the structure was determined to be completely outside the popular movement routes of visitors in Yellowstone National Park, not on any official tour routes, and not near points with special scenery that would attract attention, making the area have almost no natural reason for an ordinary person to approach. The surrounding terrain included patches of sparse forest interspersed with natural rock and low vegetation mats, not forming a clear direction, with no signage, no signs of tourist or research activity, and not within regularly patrolled areas. Reaching this position required leaving marked trails and moving through unstable terrain sections, which most visitors avoided for safety and regulatory compliance, thereby creating a natural concealment layer that made random detection nearly zero. The area around the cabin had no signs of external habitation, no trash, no discarded items, no traces of fire or heat sources, and no objects indicating recent human presence. The ground surface showed no trails formed by repeated movement, no signs of grass being trampled in a fixed direction, no tire tracks or extended footprints, indicating that any activity in the area, if present, was controlled to leave no clear traces. Small signs, if they once existed, could have been erased or blended with the environment over time, making it difficult to determine usage frequency even for experienced scene observers. The system entrance was not designed as a conventional door, but integrated directly into the cabin floor structure, where the wooden planks were selected and treated to have similar age, color, and texture to the rest, creating no distinguishable differences to the naked eye. Joint lines between material planks were installed precisely, creating no easily noticeable gaps, and the entire floor surface felt seamless like a unified block, making it nearly impossible to identify the entrance location without prior knowledge. At points adjacent to natural ground or rock, details were adjusted to blend completely with the surrounding terrain, blurring the boundary between artificial structure and natural environment. There were no handles, hinges, or any exposed opening mechanisms, and all opening and closing operations depended on a hidden mechanism that could only be operated by knowing exactly how to apply force. In addition to visual factors, the system was also designed to eliminate signals detectable through light and sound. No light sources leaked outside the cabin, even in low light or nighttime conditions, with no gaps allowing interior light to escape, indicating the entire lighting system, if present, was fully controlled and isolated. Regarding sound, the underground structure was wrapped in layers of material capable of absorbing and reducing sound transmission, combined with its depth below ground, making any sound generated inside unable to propagate to the surrounding environment. Even standing near the cabin in quiet conditions, no sounds were recorded, no vibrations or signs indicating a space below was in use. The holding space deep in the underground core was deliberately designed with restricted dimensions, not allowing those inside to move freely or stand straight in a normal posture, forcing the body to maintain a contracted state for long periods, thereby gradually reducing natural mobility. The low ceiling height limited all attempts to stand up, while the width and length were insufficient for continuous steps, making position changes difficult and unsustainable for long without causing severe fatigue. The space was not divided into separate areas, but kept as a single block, so all activities such as resting, eating, and existing took place within the same limited range, increasing the level of control over even the smallest movements. Interior surfaces were treated to completely eliminate grip points, with no clear edges, no raised ridges, no gaps large enough to place hands or feet for leverage, making it nearly impossible to use the environment for support in moving or climbing. The materials used had high hardness, low friction, or flattened surfaces, providing no conditions for scratching, breaking, or weakening the structure over time. No loose items existed in the space that could be used as tools, no loose wooden bars, no removable metal pieces, no ropes or long objects that could create pulling force, and no sharp objects that could be used to cut or weaken connection points. All components were fixed to the main structure, completely eliminating the possibility of reusing the environment as a support source. The fixed points arranged inside were not for supporting daily activities, but designed for absolute movement control, placed at strategic positions so that when the body was restrained, the range of motion was limited to a minimum, not allowing free posture changes or access to other areas in the space. The distance between fixed points and surrounding surfaces was precisely calculated, creating no gaps sufficient to turn the body fully, not allowing momentum buildup or force accumulation, causing all resistance efforts to be neutralized from the start. Even when not restrained, the spatial structure still restricted movement to the point where significant force could not be generated to impact walls or ceiling, reducing the ability to damage the structure. The space also provided no elements to aid orientation or position assessment, with no windows, no natural light sources, no clear reference points, making determining direction or searching for an exit meaningless. The system had only one entry path from above, fully controlled from the outside and inaccessible from inside, with no opening mechanisms installed on the inside, and no way to affect the locking system without external intervention. There were no secondary escape routes, no backup tunnels, no ventilation gaps large enough for a person to crawl through, and no structures leading to the outside environment without passing through the main control point. This made all escape possibilities completely dependent on a single point, while that point remained out of reach and unoperable. Joints between walls, floor, and ceiling were tightly reinforced, with no signs of temporary assembly, no positions that could be disassembled by hand force or limited mechanical force. The overall structure functioned as a unified block, withstanding internal impacts without significant deformation, rendering all braking attempts fruitless. Inside the holding space, resource control was organized as a core part of the system, where every basic need of the victims depended entirely on external supply, and there was no possibility of self-sufficiency. The water source was not designed as a fixed or continuous supply system, with no faucets or reservoirs that victims could access at will, but was only introduced at unpredictable times and in unstable quantities, making the maintenance of bodily balance completely dependent on a schedule they could not predict. The absence of a fixed cycle eliminated the ability to adapt physiologically, as the body could not establish a stable consumption rhythm, leading to prolonged states of deprivation alternating with short periods of replenishment, creating continuous fluctuations in physical condition. Food was also supplied on a similar principle, not according to specific times, without guaranteeing consistent quantity or quality, and with no factors allowing prediction of the next supply. This prevented victims from building daily routines, adjusting energy consumption levels, and gradually led them into a state of exhaustion due to prolonged shortages. The space had no natural light sources, no windows, no gaps for outside light to enter, making the entire environment completely dependent on artificial light controlled from outside. Any light, if present, was not maintained continuously but appeared at unstable intervals, completely disrupting the body's day-night cycle. The inability to distinguish time caused victims to lose the ability to perceive biological rhythms, unable to determine when to rest or wake, leading to severe sleep disorders and neurological dysfunction. During periods without light, the space was plunged into complete darkness, with no points of orientation or clear objects, increasing feelings of disorientation and isolation. The internal temperature was not adjusted for comfort or stability, with no active temperature control system and no materials to help retain body heat. The environment could change according to outside conditions, but was amplified by the sealed space, creating prolonged periods of cold or heat that victims had no effective way to adapt to. The lack of adjustment means such as blankets, extra clothing, or heat sources forced the body to cope with temperature fluctuations in a weakened state, increasing energy consumption and accelerating the exhaustion process. There were no exploitable resources that victims could access themselves, no groundwater, no stored food within reach, no materials that could be converted into energy sources or survival tools. All elements necessary for survival were kept out of reach and only introduced in a controlled manner, preventing victims from developing any form of self-sufficiency. This not only limited their ability to maintain physical condition, but also completely eliminated any sense of agency, as every action related to survival depended on external factors they could not influence. The space also provided no basic sanitation conditions, with no drainage system or separate area for physiological needs, causing the environment to quickly deteriorate and directly affect health. The accumulation of waste in the confined space increased the risk of infection and disease, while victims had no means to improve or change the situation. The lack of stable clean water also reduced the ability to maintain personal hygiene, causing the body to gradually weaken not only from lack of nutrition, but also from unsafe environmental conditions. Prolonged malnutrition became the central factor leading to comprehensive physical deterioration, as the amount of food provided was insufficient to maintain basic physiological functions and lacked any stability for the body to adapt. Energy intake did not match the consumption required to maintain body temperature, muscle activity, and internal organ function, causing the body to gradually shift to using reserves, starting with fat tissue and then muscle tissue, resulting in noticeable muscle atrophy and severe loss of strength. Prolonged deficiencies in protein, vitamins, and minerals impaired cell regeneration, directly affecting the immune system and increasing the risk of infections. Under conditions without adequate replenishment, the body could not repair even minor injuries, causing them to accumulate over time and become serious problems. Wounds that developed in this environment, whether small or large, were not properly treated or cleaned, leading to a high risk of infection. Without medication, bandages, or sanitary conditions, scratches, bruises, or injuries from contact with hard surfaces quickly became sources of prolonged pain as bacteria thrived in the damp, sealed environment. Infections not only caused pain, but also added burden to an already weakened immune system, forcing the body to allocate limited resources to fight multiple issues simultaneously. Uncontrolled pain became a constant state without breaks, reducing the ability to rest and recover while affecting the nervous system. Prolonged restricted posture created continuous pressure on muscle groups and joints, leading to musculoskeletal damage. The inability to fully extend the body or change posture freely caused muscles to contract, lose elasticity, and gradually lose normal function. Joints that were not adequately moved became stiff, with reduced range of motion, potentially leading to early joint adhesion or degeneration. Continuous pressure on certain points on the body, especially areas in contact with hard surfaces, could cause soft tissue damage, reduce blood circulation, and increase the risk of localized necrosis. Without medical intervention, these injuries went undetected or untreated in time, leading to long-term consequences for mobility. The combination of malnutrition, infection, and restricted movement created a vicious cycle of functional decline in which each factor worsened the others. The body not only lost strength, but also coordination, with slowed reflexes and gradually diminishing balance maintenance. Without conditions for exercise or space to move, the locomotor system was not used properly and gradually lost function. The cardiovascular and respiratory systems were also affected when the body was not exercised, leading to reduced circulation efficiency and gas exchange, increasing feelings of fatigue and shortness of breath, even with minimal movements. No recovery mechanisms were established in this environment, with no proper rest periods, no nutrition for regeneration, and no conditions to reduce load on damaged organs. All injuries accumulated over time without resolution, causing the body to gradually approach total exhaustion. Internal organ functions such as digestion, excretion, and thermoregulation were affected due to lack of energy and electrolyte imbalance, increasing the risk of serious disorders. Meanwhile, the nervous system operated under continuous stress from pain and sleep deprivation, leading to reduced information processing and environmental response. The decline did not occur suddenly, but accumulated over time, causing victims to gradually lose the ability to self-care, unable to maintain basic activities, and become completely dependent on external supplies. In addition to physical exhaustion, the confinement environment also created a continuous and deliberate system of psychological impact, in which completely breaking the perception of time became the foundational factor in disorienting the victims' minds. The space had no natural light sources whatsoever and no changes in light intensity according to the day-night cycle, preventing the body from recognizing the time of day or the passage of time. Any artificial light, if present, did not follow any rules, did not repeat on a fixed cycle, and could be turned on or off at unpredictable moments, completely disrupting natural biological rhythms. The inability to determine time caused victims to lose the ability to establish routines, not knowing when to rest or stay awake, and gradually losing their sense of past and present as all time periods became identical, with no milestones to distinguish them. This disorder directly affected cognitive function, reducing the ability to concentrate, think logically, and remember, making information processing slow and inaccurate. Along with that, complete isolation from the outside environment and any form of social interaction created a profound psychological void, as victims had no opportunity to communicate, no feedback from others, and no signals confirming the existence of the outside world. With no familiar sounds, no voices, and no environmental changes, all sensory stimuli were minimized to the lowest level, leaving the nervous system without enough input to maintain stability. This lack of stimulation could lead to cognitive disorders as the brain began generating endogenous responses to compensate, blurring the boundary between reality and imagination. Under conditions without social interaction, victims had no chance to verify their thoughts, adjust behavior based on feedback, and gradually lost effective communication ability even if opportunities arose later. The controller's behavior did not follow any stable rules, with no fixed schedule, no repeating patterns, and no advance warning signs, creating a state of continuous anxiety. The supply of resources, turning lights on or off, or any external intervention occurred unpredictably, preventing victims from mentally preparing or building adaptation strategies. This instability increased stress levels, as the brain remained in a state of high alert but without information to process, leading to mental fatigue and reduced response capability. The absence of rules also meant no expectations, and when every action could or could not happen without clear reason, victims gradually lost their sense of control, unable to predict the near future or plan any actions. This prolonged state led to the gradual decline of higher cognitive functions with impaired analysis, evaluation, and decision-making abilities. Victims might begin losing the ability to distinguish time periods, forget the sequence of events, and could not maintain a continuous train of thought. The combination of lost time perception, social isolation, and unstable environment created continuous psychological pressure in which the brain had no opportunity to rest or restructure. Sleep, if it occurred, did not follow natural cycles but was interrupted by light, noise, or environmental changes, reducing rest quality and affecting neurological recovery. Prolonged sleep deprivation worsened cognitive problems, causing emotional disorders, reduced behavior control, and increased risk of confusion or disorientation states. Under these conditions, victims gradually lost the ability to respond normally to the environment, as stimuli were no longer processed in the usual way, and reflexes became slow or inappropriate. The traces collected inside the holding space showed the existence of prolonged habitation activity in a sealed environment, with characteristics inconsistent with temporary or short-term use. The floor surface and areas in direct contact with the body recorded uneven wear concentrated at certain fixed positions, indicating repeated presence of limited movement within the same small range. There were no signs of wide movement in the space, or traces distributed in multiple directions. Instead, there were areas under continuous impact, consistent with the body being restricted to certain postures for long periods. The inner material layers also recorded accumulation of biological traces, including hair, skin cells, and other organic components, not dispersed but concentrated in a narrow range, reflecting the absence of natural airflow and exchange with the outside environment. Biological analysis of collected samples confirmed the continuous presence of humans in this sealed space over an extended period, with signs indicating accumulation occurred over time rather than from a single event. The concentration of biological components increased gradually by layer, showing no cleaning or environmental replacement process and no significant interruptions in the victim's presence. Samples from various positions in the space all yielded similar results, reinforcing the conclusion that this presence was continuous and uninterrupted by movement outside or environmental changes. No signs were found indicating that victims had ever been allowed free movement in a wider space or outside the holding area, with no extended footprints leading to other areas, no dispersion of biological traces beyond the core range, and no evidence of contact with the outside environment during the corresponding period. All presence traces were confined within the sealed space, with no changes in environmental conditions such as natural light, fluctuating humidity, or cyclic temperature, indicating victims had no access to the outside environment throughout their confinement. The collected materials also contained no foreign elements such as outside dust, seasonal pollen, or microorganisms characteristic of open spaces, further supporting the conclusion of complete isolation. The distribution of biological traces also reflected the level of restricted activity, as other areas in the space showed almost no signs of use, no significant position changes over time, and no evidence that victims could access the entire space. These signs were consistent with controlled and limited movement within a very small range, not allowing free expansion or repositioning. In addition, the analyzed samples also showed signs of prolonged physical decline, with indicators reflecting poor nutritional status and physiological stress consistent with the confinement conditions identified in previous sections. There were no signs of recovery or improvement during this period, indicating the environment did not provide the necessary conditions for maintaining health. The combination of physical traces and biological analysis formed a consistent picture of human existence in a sealed, controlled space with no ability to access the outside environment for a long time. The evidence not only confirmed the presence, but also reflected the living conditions and level of restriction the victims endured, while ruling out the possibility that this was a short-term use space or one with free movement. During the re-examination of all initial data related to the time of disappearance, a witness statement that had been recorded but not fully evaluated began to attract investigators' attention when cross-referenced with the new findings. This witness was a tourist present in the vicinity of the side trail where Ethan and Margaret were last seen, who reported seeing an unfamiliar vehicle appear at a location not part of the official parking area around the time the two victims disappeared. According to the description, the vehicle was not on the list of vehicles registered in the visitor area that day, and its appearance position did not match normal tourist movement behavior because it was offset from the main route and near a less traveled area. The witness did not record any attention-drawing behavior from the vehicle or driver. However, its presence in an area with normally controlled vehicle traffic caused the information to be kept in the initial report. The vehicle description included neutral colors, a common style, and no standout identifying features, which initially made identification difficult as it matched many different vehicle types. However, the witness emphasized that the vehicle appeared briefly and left without following the usual direction of other vehicles in the area, creating an anomaly in the day's recorded activity sequence. When cross-referenced with data collected after 2 years, including vehicle registration records, traffic camera data at park entry and exit points, and information from checkpoints, investigators noticed a match between the witness description and a specific vehicle that had entered the area during the corresponding time frame but had no clear sightseeing schedule. This vehicle was recorded passing through one of Yellowstone National Park's entrance gates, but did not appear in any data related to the use of main parking lots or popular stopping points, indicating it had moved outside closely monitored routes. Traffic surveillance camera data showed this vehicle made unusual changes in direction, not following standard sightseeing routes, and at times disappeared from recording during a period coinciding with the victim's disappearance. The absence of data during this interval was initially overlooked due to the large number of vehicles and limited monitoring range, but when cross-referenced with the witness statement, it became a point of interest. In addition, movement time analysis showed the vehicle could have approached the side trail area very close to the time Ethan and Margaret were last seen, then left the area in a rarely used direction, avoiding main checkpoints. The described features such as color, style, and size of the vehicle all matched the registration data, although not enough to immediately identify a specific identity. It was sufficient to narrow the search scope and create a new investigative direction. Combining the witness statement and technical data allowed partial reconstruction of the vehicle's movement route, showing it had been present in the area during a time directly related to the disappearance and exhibited movement behavior inconsistent with normal tourist activity. There was no direct evidence linking this vehicle to an abduction at the time, but the time and location match, along with no reasonable explanation for its presence, made it an important factor in reconstructing the sequence of events. Investigators began re-examining all data related to this vehicle, including movement history, registration information, and appearances before and after the disappearance, to determine whether it was the connecting link between the initial scene and the confinement structure discovered later. From the witness information and initial data on the unusually appearing vehicle, investigators proceeded to filter all vehicle entry and exit data in the area within the time frame related to the day Ethan and Margaret disappeared, focusing on vehicles with routes inconsistent with normal sightseeing paths. This process included cross-referencing data from checkpoints at Yellowstone National Park entrance gates, combined with images from the traffic camera system along main roads and intersections leading to the area near the side trail. The initial raw data included hundreds of vehicles moving that day, classified by entry and exit times, direction of movement, and frequency of appearance in the recording system. Investigators first excluded vehicles with clear schedules, stops at main tourist areas, or continuous presence in camera frames along logical movement routes. After the initial screening, the list was narrowed to vehicles with interrupted movement behavior, appearing at some recording points but lost during unexplained time intervals, especially those coinciding with the victim's disappearance time. Next, the data was analyzed more deeply to identify vehicles with sudden direction changes or departures from main roads into less monitored areas, including sections leading to side trails or areas without official signage. Factors such as color, style, and vehicle size were compared with the witness description, eliminating non-matching vehicles and retaining those with the highest similarity. This process relied not only on one data source but also combined multiple systems, including data from private cameras at facilities near the park, traffic data from roads leading into the area, and reports of notable vehicles recorded that day. When the data layers were overlaid, one vehicle began to stand out as matching multiple criteria simultaneously, including appearance time near the side trail area, movement behavior not following sightseeing routes, and image characteristics similar to the initial description. This vehicle was recorded passing through an entrance gate in the morning, then appearing at an intersection near the disappearance area, then disappearing from the recording system for a significant period before reappearing on another route leading out of the area. The time period it was lost coincided with the time frame when Ethan and Margaret were no longer seen, creating a notable match. In addition, speed and distance analysis between recording points showed the vehicle could have stopped in the vicinity of the side trail, although no direct image captured the stop. Investigators continued checking the vehicle's registration data, identifying the owner and usage history, while cross-referencing with other reports to find any connections to the area or time of the incident. Identifying a vehicle matching the initial description not only narrowed the investigation scope but also provided a specific connection point between the disappearance scene and later findings about the confinement structure. Next steps included reconstructing the vehicle's detailed route on the day of the incident, identifying potential stopping points, and checking for any matches with areas capable of concealing activity. At the same time, data from days before and after the disappearance was reviewed to determine whether this vehicle had appeared in the area with unusual frequency, thereby assessing whether this was not a single event but part of planned activity. Tracing the vehicle registration information identified the owner as Victor Hale, an individual with no prominent criminal record but containing many unusual signs when delving deeper into his professional history and specialized activities. Data from licensing agencies showed Hale had received training in the medical field, specifically participating in programs related to pathology and histology research, with work periods at several medical facilities and academic environments. The early period recorded no serious issues. However, later evaluations began to reflect declining work performance and difficulties in complying with professional procedures. Internal records from previous workplaces showed many negative comments related to attitude, including lack of cooperation with colleagues, a tendency to work in isolation, and failure to follow mandatory guidelines in the medical environment. These issues led to Hale being placed under internal supervision before his contract was terminated under circumstances recorded as negative and failing to meet professional requirements. Documents related to the dismissal not only mentioned professional factors but also emphasized violations of conduct rules and ethical standards, indicating an unusual disruption in the career of a person with advanced specialized training. After that point, Hale's employment record became fragmented, with no stable positions maintained in the official medical system. Instead, there were short-term jobs or positions not directly related to his trained specialty. License applications in various states all recorded prolonged review processes, with many cases rejected or requiring additional information due to negative evaluations from previous workplaces, showing that Hale's professional reputation had been significantly affected. When cross-referenced with movement data, records showed Hale had been in the vicinity of Yellowstone National Park at a time coinciding with the day Ethan and Margaret disappeared, but there was no evidence that the travel purpose related to normal tourist activity. There were no reservations, no sightseeing schedule, and no spending data consistent with a vacation trip, making Hale's presence difficult to explain in the general context. Financial transactions in the preceding period showed a series of purchases of basic construction materials, including wood, metal, and non-specialized equipment, made sporadically over a long time and not linked to any registered legal civilian projects. This type of material had characteristics similar to those recorded in the underground structure, especially in terms of simplicity but solidity and manual installation capability. There were no signs that these materials were used for commercial or public construction purposes, and no related building permits on record. indicating the purchasing activity may have served an undeclared purpose. Hale owning the vehicle identified in the tracing, along with that vehicle appearing in the disappearance area and exhibiting movement behavior inconsistent with sightseeing routes, created a direct link between this individual and the chain of events under investigation. Data from traffic cameras and checkpoints showed the vehicle had periods when it was lost during critical time frames, then reappeared on another route leading out of the area, further reinforcing suspicion about using the vehicle to approach and leave the scene without leaving clear traces. Civil records and public data did not show Hale having wide social relationships or ties to the local community, and there were no signs of stable professional activity near the time of the incident, which increased the level of abnormality when placed in the overall context. Evaluation of behavior based on personal records, professional history, and the physical evidence collected shows that Victor Hale had a high tendency for control and displayed signs of obsession with personal power in environments where he could dominate completely. Comments in his previous work records noted that Hale had difficulty complying with organizational structures and general procedures, frequently showing a detached attitude and refusing supervision from superiors or cooperation with colleagues. This indicated a behavioral pattern in which the individual tended to seek or create environments where he could hold absolute control, unbound by external rules. When cross-referenced with the discovered confinement structure, investigators noticed a clear similarity between that need for control and the way the system was designed, in which every element from space, resources to environmental conditions was under complete external control, allowing no form of autonomy from the victims. The establishment of an environment in which those held were completely dependent on external supplies reflected a level of control that was not only physical, but also psychological, consistent with the behavioral tendencies recorded in Hale's file. In addition, data related to material purchases, location selection, and structure construction showed the ability for long-term planning with a high level of detail. Financial transactions did not occur in a short period, but were spread out sporadically, with small quantities of materials in each purchase to avoid drawing attention or suspicion from outside. The choice of construction location outside popular movement routes in Yellowstone National Park, combined with camouflage design and concealment mechanisms, demonstrated meticulous calculation aimed at minimizing the chance of detection over a long time. There were no signs of impulsive behavior or lack of preparation. Instead, there was an organized sequence of actions, from approaching the area, transporting materials, to completing the structure and maintaining operations without leaving clear traces. The ability to conceal behavior was also shown through not leaving external signs of habitation, not creating trash or clear trails, and completely controlling elements such as light and sound to avoid detection. Vehicle movement data showed Hale had the ability to adjust routes to avoid main monitoring points, with periods of lost signal coinciding with important moments in the chain of events. This indicated awareness of the monitoring system and the ability to adapt to minimize the risk of being tracked. In addition, maintaining activity in a sealed environment for a long time without detection required high persistence and discipline, along with the ability to keep personal activities secret, something not easy to achieve without a clear plan and tight control. Analysis of movement data based on personal devices and financial transaction records provided a highly reliable sequence of positioning information, allowing confirmation of Victor Hale's presence in the vicinity of Yellowstone National Park at the exact time Ethan and Margaret disappeared. Data from his mobile phone showed the device had connected to cell towers in the park area during the corresponding period, with access points recorded in sequence matching the movement direction from the entrance gate to the area near the side trail where the two victims were last seen. There were no signs that the device was completely turned off throughout the journey, but there was a short period in which the signal was not recorded, coinciding with the time Hale's vehicle also did not appear in the traffic camera system, creating a meaningful data gap in reconstructing the sequence of events. In addition to telecommunications data, Hale's financial transactions on the day of the incident also provided supplementary information about location and time. Payment records showed Hale had made several transactions at service facilities along the route leading into the park, including purchasing fuel and basic items at stops near the entrance gates, with times matching the vehicle's movement data. No transactions were recorded during the period corresponding to the signal loss area, which was consistent with the assumption that Hale had moved into an area without commercial services or had not conducted any buying or selling during that time. After the interruption period, the data showed Hale's mobile device reconnecting to a cell tower on the route leaving the area, with timing consistent with the vehicle reappearing in the camera system and continuing to move out of the park. The linkage between phone data and transaction data created a continuous timeline in which the recorded points before and after the gap all aligned with the identified journey, strengthening the hypothesis that Hale had been present in a specific area at the critical time of the incident. Investigators also analyzed location history in the days before and after the disappearance, discovering that Hale's device did not frequently appear in this area, indicating the trip was not a regular repeated activity, but had a distinct nature. However, in some previous cases, the data showed Hale had traveled to similar areas outside main routes and under low supervision, which could reflect a behavioral pattern in location selection. Data from applications and positioning systems on the device were also analyzed, including search history and marked locations. Although there was no direct information pointing to the specific trail where the disappearance occurred, there were signs that Hale had researched less traveled areas within the park beforehand. Combining various data sources from telecommunications and financial transactions to location history created a comprehensive picture of Hale's presence in the area at the time of the incident. With matching factors in time, location, and movement behavior, there was no evidence that Hale's device was used by someone else during this period, and no signs of data tampering, increasing the reliability of the conclusion. The confirmed presence was not based on a single data source, but resulted from cross-referencing multiple independent systems, each providing part of the information and combining to form a consistent logical chain. Investigators used this data sequence to reconstruct Hale's journey on the day of the incident, identify points of approach and departure from the area, and link it with previously collected physical evidence and witness statements. The chain of data on location, the discovered underground structure, and the biological traces collected inside the holding space revealed an important reality. The found system did not have sufficient conditions to maintain continuous confinement throughout the entire 2-year period, without support from external factors. Analysis of resource supply sources, ventilation capability, and signs of material wear showed that this structure was used during a certain period, but was not the only location in the entire behavioral chain. The core holding space had limited dimensions. The water and food supply system showed no signs of stable long-term operation, and the activity traces were not continuous according to a regular cycle, suggesting that the victims may have been moved between multiple locations rather than kept fixed in one single place. Investigators cross-referenced internal environmental data from the structure with external factors such as soil temperature, humidity, and seasonal variations, noticing that some traces did not match the natural conditions at the current location throughout the entire disappearance period, thereby strengthening the hypothesis that this structure was only part of a larger system. Construction material data also showed inconsistency, with some components not originating from the surrounding area, indicating material transport from outside and the possible existence of other sites built according to the same principle. The analysis of Victor Hale's behavior in previous sections, especially the tendency for long-term planning and environmental control, showed a high likelihood that the subject did not rely on a single location, but built a network of pre-prepared sites, each serving a specific function in the behavioral chain. Some signs at the underground structure, including fixed anchor points, locking mechanisms, and spatial layout, showed a repeatable design, as if applied according to a standard model that could be reproduced at multiple different locations. Investigators expanded the analysis scope, sweeping areas with similar terrain characteristics within the wider range of Yellowstone National Park and adjacent areas, focusing on positions outside main tourist routes with high natural cover and low monitoring. Satellite data and aerial photographs were used to search for small anomalies in surface structures, such as changes in vegetation mats or unclear signs of human intervention, thereby identifying some potentially related locations. In addition, Hale's movement records over many previous years were reanalyzed, revealing that the subject had appeared at several different remote areas over a long period, with trips that had no clear purpose in terms of tourism or work, which aligned with the hypothesis that locations may have been prepared in advance in stages. The existence of multiple sites not only explained the ability to maintain prolonged confinement, but also fit the identified pattern of control and behavior concealment, in which moving victims between different locations helped reduce the risk of detection and disrupt traceable trails. Signs of interruption in biological data, including changes in microbial composition and material traces, also showed that victims had been exposed to multiple different environments throughout their confinement period, further supporting this hypothesis. The comprehensive analysis combining movement data, behavioral patterns, and characteristics of the discovered structure allowed narrowing the search scope to a second suspected area with similar terrain and isolation characteristics. Investigators used Hale's previous positioning sequence, combined with the identified data gaps on the day of the incident, to reconstruct routes that may have been used but did not appear clearly in the monitoring system. From there, a geographic area outside the main sightseeing routes of Yellowstone National Park was identified as noteworthy, with features suitable for building and concealing a structure similar to the previously discovered system. This area had dense tree cover, rugged terrain with many natural rock layers, and no official trails leading in, making access possible only with specific knowledge of the terrain. Satellite data showed some small changes in vegetation mats here during the years near the disappearance period, including areas with signs of disturbance that were later partially restored, which fit the hypothesis of deliberate concealed human intervention. In addition, analysis of elevation and geological structure showed that this area had sufficiently thick layers of soil and rock to support underground space construction without revealing clear signs on the Bin-Sumthout surface, while still ensuring the ability to maintain stable temperature, an important factor in sustaining a sealed space over a long time. Investigators also cross-referenced weather data and environmental conditions in this area over the 2-year period, noting that fluctuations did not significantly affect surface structures, making the area an ideal location to maintain an underground system without detection. Analysis of Hale's behavior showed the subject tended to choose locations accessible by vehicle but without leaving clear traces, and this area met that condition with some indirect access routes through unmarked side paths on tourist maps. Data from Hale's previous movements also showed his device had connected to cell towers on the edge of this area, although there was no direct recording at the central position, which was consistent with the device possibly being turned off or losing signal when the subject moved deeper inside. The identification of the second suspected area was not based on a single factor, but resulted from the overlapping of multiple data layers, including movement patterns, geographical features, signs of environmental intervention, and the suspect's location selection behavior. Signs obtained from the first structure, such as spatial layout, types of materials used, and methods of concealing entrances, were also used as criteria to sweep this area, helping identify points with higher probability within the wide range. The analysis results showed several specific positions in the area fully met these criteria, with surface features inconsistent with the surrounding environment, including slight differences in soil color, surface compaction, and unnatural distribution of vegetation mats. Investigators assessed that these signs, although small and easily overlooked under normal observation conditions, held important significance when placed in the overall context of the case. The plan of approach was built on the assumption that the victims were still alive, but in a state of severe exhaustion, with the risk of death increasing over time if not intervened in promptly. So the entire operation was designed to prioritize speed, while still maintaining tight control to avoid causing additional harm to the victims during the entry and rescue process. The participating forces included special tactics units, demolition technicians, scene reconnaissance teams, and medical personnel assigned clearly according to each phase, with each group responsible for a specific task in the pre-planned sequence of actions. The approach route was chosen not to overlap with any natural trails or popular movement routes, using detailed terrain maps, satellite data, and behavioral prediction models to enter the suspected area in a direction that minimized the possibility of remote detection. During movement, the teams maintained tactical distances, limited noise and traces, and used thermal detection minimization equipment to avoid leaving any identifiable signals. Intermediate stopping points were pre-identified for equipment checks, plan adjustments, and maintaining communication between groups. All activities were synchronized in real time to ensure the entire formation moved as a unified system. Upon reaching the zoned position, technical forces conducted surface checks using multiple methods, including soil compaction measurements, vegetation mat structure analysis, and detection equipment to identify the existence of voids below. Abnormal signs were recorded at a higher density than the surrounding area, indicating human intervention had occurred in the past and been deliberately concealed, thereby identifying the location of the second hidden entrance. This entrance was not only concealed by natural elements, but also reinforced with a system of sturdy materials, including multiple layers of thick plywood, reinforced metal, and fixed anchor points, forming a protective layer capable of withstanding strong mechanical impacts and delaying the intrusion process for a long time. The exterior structure was designed to disperse impact force, making it impossible to breach with a single point of force and requiring multiple steps with specialized equipment. Technical forces used cutting tools, high-pressure drills, and material separation devices to open each protective layer, with every step performed in sequence to avoid causing vibrations that could collapse the structure below or endanger the victims. The structure-breaking process took longer than expected due to the durability of the system and its complex arrangement designed to resist conventional intrusion methods. Throughout this process, the medical team maintained a ready state at the closest possible position, prepared for immediate intervention once the entrance was opened, while environmental parameters such as oxygen concentration, humidity, and temperature were continuously measured to assess safety levels when entering the underground space. When the final protective layer was breached, a passage leading down to the interior space was identified with significantly greater depth than the previously discovered structure. The passage had a sloped form with many narrow transition sections, low ceilings, and unexpected turns, forcing the forces to use safety ropes, climbing equipment, and specialized lighting systems to move. The interior space showed a higher level of isolation, with no natural light, no clear ventilation signs, stagnant air, and high humidity, creating a harsh environment for prolonged survival. Quick measurement devices showed oxygen levels lower than normal, forcing the forces to use respiratory support equipment during approach. As they moved deeper inside, the spatial structure showed deliberate arrangement to limit movement and orientation, with narrow corridors, dividing compartments, and blocking points making access to the central core complex and time-consuming. Upon reaching the core area, the victims were discovered in a state of severe exhaustion, with signs of prolonged dehydration, heavy malnutrition, soft tissue damage due to pressure and lack of movement, slow response capability, and inability to move on their own. Physical injury signs included musculoskeletal damage from being fixed in unfavorable postures, muscle contractures, and signs of infection at untreated wound sites. The confinement system showed fixed points designed to completely restrict movement, forcing the victims to maintain a controlled state for a long time, leading to comprehensive decline in bodily functions. When the forces approached, the victims did not immediately recognize them, with initial reactions of body withdrawal, avoidance of light, and signs of panic upon contact with the outside environment, indicating the prolonged psychological impact of complete isolation in a sealed space. The medical team conducted a rapid survival assessment, determining basic indicators such as heart rate, respiration, and level of consciousness, performing on-site first aid including oxygen supply, intravenous fluid replacement, body temperature control, and reducing the risk of shock, while preparing a movement plan suitable for the weak physical condition and high risk of complications. Extracting the victims from the structure encountered many difficulties due to the narrow space, great depth, and complex terrain conditions. The forces had to use support equipment to secure the body, provide support, and move section by section at a controlled speed, ensuring no additional injury during transport. Each movement step was closely coordinated between technical and medical units, with continuous monitoring of vital signs to detect and address fluctuations promptly. This process was prolonged to ensure maximum safety under limited space and unfavorable environmental conditions. Upon reaching the surface, the victims were immediately transferred to a temporary medical reception area for further stabilization before transport. Respiratory support, circulation, and infection control measures were implemented immediately. Specialized transport vehicles were dispatched to take the victims to the nearest treatment facility in the shortest possible time. Throughout this process, vital signs were continuously monitored and intervention measures were taken as soon as necessary to sustain life. As soon as the victim's survival status was confirmed and the initial first aid process completed, all investigative resources were redirected to the single goal of locating and apprehending Victor Hale in the shortest time possible to prevent the subject from continuing to move or destroying remaining evidence. Authorities activated emergency pursuit procedures with simultaneous participation from local forces, in-depth criminal investigation units, and federal agencies. All data related to Hale was compiled and fed into a central analysis system for real-time processing, including call history, cell tower connection data, financial transactions, traffic cameras, and related electronic device signals. Analysts quickly noticed an unusual feature in Hale's movement behavior. He did not maintain a fixed position, but continuously changed at short intervals. Phone signals appeared at multiple different points with irregular gaps, indicating the subject deliberately turned off the device or switched devices to reduce tracking risk. At the same time, Financial transactions recorded at fuel stations and small retail stores along the route showed Hale continued constant movement, not staying long in any area and tending to avoid points with high monitoring density. Data from traffic camera systems was retrieved and filtered according to times corresponding to these transactions, allowing identification of a vehicle matching the previous description, with license plates matching the vehicle registered under Hale's name. The vehicle's appearances were recorded at various positions and connected into a calculated movement route sequence, not following direct paths, but frequently turning into side roads, looping through low monitoring areas and returning to main axes at greater distances, showing the subject had clear awareness of tracking risks and was actively creating noise in the tracing process. Authorities analyzed this movement pattern to predict the next direction, combining it with geographical features and the transportation system around Yellowstone National Park to identify points the subject would likely have to pass if continuing in the current direction. This led to the establishment of a multi-layered blockade system, including checkpoints at important intersections, narrow road sections, or areas where vehicles had to slow down, while maintaining mobile patrol teams on side roads to limit the subject's ability to suddenly change direction. Throughout this process, phone signals continued to be monitored to update Hale's approximate position in real time. Although the signal was not continuous, it was still sufficient to determine the area of activity and narrow the search scope. When Hale's vehicle approached one of the established blockade points, authorities implemented a controlled vehicle stop procedure with tight coordination between units to ensure maximum safety and limit the subject's ability to resist or flee. Specialized vehicles were used to create a safe distance and direct the vehicle into the control area. Hale was forced to stop with no other movement options. The approach was carried out according to standard procedure, and the subject was subdued without major conflict or significant resistance recorded at the time of arrest. Immediately afterward, the vehicle was searched under the supervision of specialized units. Inside the vehicle, numerous items directly related to the construction and operation of the confinement system were found, including mechanical tools, reinforcement materials, independent lighting equipment, backup power sources, and tools for maintaining a sealed environment over long periods. These items were inconsistent with normal use and showed clear similarity to the previously discovered structure. All were seized and sealed for forensic examination. In addition, detailed notes on the construction, operation, and maintenance of the confinement structures were found in the vehicle, including spatial layout diagrams, material lists, implementation timelines, and notes on victim control. The content of the documents showed a pre-planned operation with a high level of detail, not impulsive behavior, but the result of systematic calculation and implementation over a long time. Analysis of these documents showed Hale had anticipated multiple scenarios, including movement between locations and maintaining operations under interrupted conditions. After Hale's arrest, investigators searched his residence and related locations, discovering additional evidence strengthening the direct link between Hale and the actions committed, including detailed technical drawings of the underground systems, records of construction material purchases, specialized equipment, and construction process notes. These documents matched the structures discovered at the scene and clearly reflected the level of preparation and long-term planning capability of the subject, while also showing that the construction of confinement systems was not an isolated act, but possibly part of a sustained chain of activities over a long period. Investigators cross-referenced all evidence collected from the vehicle, residence, and personal devices with previously available data, including telecommunications data, transactions, and scene analysis. The interrogation of Victor Hale was conducted according to proper legal procedures with the presence of defense counsel. However, throughout the initial sessions, and even into the trial phase, Hale did not admit to the criminal behavior as interpreted by the prosecution, but continuously adjusted his statements to deny elements of coercion and unlawful confinement. The subject asserted that all his actions were only intended to protect and maintain the life of the victims in an environment he considered safer than outside. This phrasing was repeated with many variations but did not change the core nature of denying abduction and torture, while clearly demonstrating a distorted perception of personal control over others, in which Hale claimed that restricting freedom of movement, controlling food sources, light, and living environment was not harmful behavior, but a form of necessary management. Forensic psychologists summoned to analyze the statements concluded that the subject showed signs of extreme, control-oriented thinking, combined with the ability to rationalize behavior to avoid facing legal consequences. However, these evaluations did not change the focus of the case because the collected physical evidence system was direct and undeniable. The entire discovered underground structure, including camouflage layers, hidden entrances, mechanical locking systems, and sealed holding spaces, was presented as primary evidence showing the existence of a deliberately designed system to isolate and control humans over a long period. Construction materials, tools, and equipment seized from Hale's vehicle and residence were examined and confirmed to match components in this structure, forming a clear chain linking the subject to the scene. In addition, the detailed notes on the construction and operation of the system provided evidence of long-term planning, clearly showing preparation phases, construction, testing, and adjustments to ensure the system could operate stably under sealed and hard-to-detect conditions. Phone data and financial transactions were presented in court showing Hale was present in the Yellowstone National Park area at the time of the disappearance and maintained movement and material purchases consistent with the progress of system construction throughout the subsequent period. Scene experts also provided analysis of biological traces and environmental conditions inside the structure, confirming the continuous presence of humans in a sealed space with conditions that did not meet normal survival standards, including lack of natural light, limited ventilation, high humidity, and unstable temperature. Medical evidence from the victim's treatment process was presented to prove the direct consequences of prolonged confinement, including severe malnutrition, musculoskeletal damage from restricted movement, infections from untreated wounds, and cognitive function decline due to prolonged isolation. These factors were considered by the court as inevitable consequences of a system designed to completely control basic human needs. The prosecution argued that Hale's behavior was not only abduction, but also included the construction and operation of a deliberately designed confinement environment to maintain the victim's complete state of dependency, thereby reinforcing absolute control over a long period. The trial focused on proving three main elements: planning, prolonged duration, and severe harm level, in which evidence of the system's structure and notes played a key role in determining the subject's intent and level of preparation. The defense counsel attempted to argue that Hale had no intent to cause death and had provided minimum needs to sustain life. But this argument was rejected when experts confirmed that the actual confinement conditions did not meet any safety standards and directly led to the victim's severe exhaustion. The court concluded that Hale's behavior demonstrated systematic calculation extending over many years. After the sentence was pronounced and the official trial process concluded, the consequences of the entire case did not stop at determining Victor Hale's criminal responsibility, but continued to manifest clearly in the prolonged recovery condition of the victims. Ethan and Margaret received long-term treatment with continuous monitoring by medical and rehabilitation specialists. Initial assessments showed their bodies had suffered severe impacts from prolonged malnutrition, lack of movement, and unsuitable environmental conditions. Their musculoskeletal systems were markedly weakened, with limited mobility and requiring a long time to partially restore basic functions. Many old wounds left complications, including signs of infections that had occurred and were treated late, affecting the overall recovery process. In addition, the nervous system also suffered significant impact as reflexes to light, sound, and human contact were unstable in the early period after rescue. Psychologists determined that complete isolation in an environment without the concept of time and lacking social interaction had led to cognitive decline, information processing ability, and emotional response. Re-establishing basic living habits such as eating, sleeping, and communication required a systematic, prolonged intervention process that could not achieve results in a short time. The psychological recovery process encountered many difficulties as the victims showed fear reactions to open environments, natural light, and the presence of strangers. Signs of anxiety, panic, and loss of safety feeling appeared repeatedly, requiring in-depth support from psychological therapy specialists over a long period. Social reintegration therefore became a major challenge as communication skills, social awareness, and self-reliance ability had been interrupted throughout the confinement period. Recovery programs were designed to gradually return them to a normal environment, but had to be continuously adjusted based on actual responses. The victims' families were also deeply affected by the case, as they faced a prolonged period of uncertainty during the disappearance time, followed by the process of adapting to the reality that their loved ones returned in a state of exhaustion and required long-term care. Psychological pressure came not only from memories of the disappearance, but also from the responsibility of supporting recovery and facing long-term changes in life. Family members were advised to participate in psychological support programs to handle stress and maintain stability during the caregiving process. The case was evaluated by authorities and experts as a rare case of systematic confinement and torture, with a high level of preparation and control. The existence of deliberately designed underground structures in a vast natural area raised questions about future detection and prevention capabilities. Investigation summary reports emphasize that the late discovery was not due to lack of initial search efforts, but the complex concealment nature of the system. This led to a review of search procedures and risk assessment in large areas, especially those with complex terrain and low control. Authorities also considered increasing the use of technology in detecting abnormal structures, including terrain analysis and environmental data, to minimize the risk of missing similar signs in other cases. The case also became an important research document in the field of organized crime investigation related to unlawful confinement, providing real-world data on how an individual could build and maintain a prolonged control system without detection for a long time. Conclusions drawn from the case not only hold value in perfecting investigation procedures, but also in raising awareness of early warning signs, thereby contributing to limiting the possibility of similar behaviors recurring in the future. If you want to follow more cases like this and understand more clearly how the truth is revealed after many years of silence, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. Thank you for watching. See you again in the next video with another case that still has many unsolved mysteries.